Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Humanitarian officials are concerned as over 1 million people are ordered out of Gaza as Israel begins a huge offensive against the terrorist group Hamas. Disturbing video has been released showing young children who are allegedly being taught to hate and kill Jews. And a special performance honoring the Man in Black is coming to Lethbridge. We chat with Devin Brain, who'll perform the songs from the 1968 concert at Folsom Prison.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A humanitarian official says the noose is tightening around the civilian population in Gaza. Martin Griffith says there is no way the 1.1 million people living in northern Gaza can evacuate and move across a densely populated war zone in less than 24 hours. That's how long Israel has given the people in Gaza. Russian President Vladimir Putin chimed in saying Israel has the right to defend itself following last week's terrorist attack by Hamas, but he's warning against hurting civilians because not all people there support Hamas. But you may remember, however, that Putin's Russian troops have also killed Ukrainian civilians in its war with Ukraine. A news director with the Associated Press explains where Israel is concentrating the majority of its efforts.
The attention is focused on the neighborhood of Rimal in Gaza City. This is Gaza City's business district. It's home to many businesses, obviously. It's a residential area, many NGOs, international media, but also home to some Hamas offices, which is why it's drawing the military's attention. During past periods of fighting, Israel always allowed some humanitarian aid. It always allowed its main cargo crossing to remain open, at least in a limited capacity. Now everything has been shuttered completely. That is the main gateway for cargo to go, and food and stuff to go into Gaza. That's not an option anymore. So what we see now, and what we will see in the coming days, are shortages of food, of fuel, electricity, and so forth. You also see people fleeing their homes, close to 10%, nearly 200,000 people, about 10% of Gaza's entire population have been displaced and forced to flee their homes. They're staying either with relatives or in UN shelters that have been set up.
The nearly week-old battle has killed at least 2,800 people. Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly is beginning a 3-day mission to the region in Tel Aviv, where she's meeting with both Israeli and Jordanian foreign ministers. Tens of thousands of Muslims marched in support for Palestinians and protested the intensifying Israeli bombardment of Gaza. The huge demonstrations are underscoring the risk of a wider regional conflict as Israel prepares for a possible ground invasion. In Beirut, thousands of supporters of Lebanon's Hezbollah terrorist group chanted slogans of "Death to Israel." Demonstrators in Egypt, meanwhile, formed a ring around a mosque in downtown Cairo. And in Islamabad, Pakistan, some protesters there trampled on both Israeli and American flags. You know, there are videos surfacing of how Hamas practiced an attack in plain sight just weeks before the border breach and terrorist attack on innocent civilians.
The thought of 2,000 Hamas terrorists getting control of towns in southern Israel and overcoming a multi-billion-dollar security system, I don't think was on anybody's radar screen in terms of possibilities.
اليوم حماس أقوى أضعاف مضاعفة مما كانت عليه عام 2014. نحن حضرنا لهذه المعركة جيدا ونستعد لكل السيناريوهات بما فيها سيناريو المعركة طويلة الأمد.
Another video has surfaced which is showing children who are allegedly being taught to hate and kill Jews. A warning that what you're about to see and hear may be quite disturbing.
لأنه نعمل حرب إنه نفرجي اليهود إنه إحنا مش إنه إحنا مش شاطرين، إحنا قوايا كمان. في ناس بحبوا فلسطين بدهم يحاربوا وبضحوا بدمهم عشان فلسطين. أنا بدي أهزمهم بالحرب، بدي أهزمهم.
بيعلمونا إنه الأقصى إلنا وإلنا يعني الحق، يعني إلنا فلسطين والأراضي كلها إلنا، لأنهم بسبب كذبهم وانتهاكاتهم إنهم يقولون إنه الهيكل تحت المسجد الأقصى، ولا مرة إنه يكون الهيكل تحت المسجد الأقصى. أنا بقرأ اليهود بعلمونا إن الصهيونية هم أعدائنا وهم أهم شيء لازم يسوي فيهم عملية.
يعني إنهم بيعلمونا بالمدرسة إنهم إرهابيين
بيحكوا لنا عن اليهود إنهم هدول مش منيح وهدول بقتلوا قاعدين بشبابنا.
Wow. Well, it was good to see more sunshine today and warmer temperatures across much of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though the moisture has left us and a decent weekend is shaping up.
Oh, it sure is. Hell, looks like it's going to be a beautiful weekend shaping up for us. We are still seeing a few clouds overnight. We're going to see a bit of fog as well developing after midnight. That should stick around until the morning when it will dissipate. We're looking at an overnight low of 1 degree with 20 to 40 winds, and those should stick around until about noon on Saturday. And then Saturday, we're looking all the way up to 17 degrees. And the best news is that's just the beginning of what's going to be some lovely days ahead of us. And I'll be back later in the show to give you all those details.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The Supreme Court of Canada ruled against Ottawa's Bill C-69, or as Jason Kenney once referred to it, the No More Pipelines Act, on the environmental effects of major developments. 5 of 7 judges ruled that most of it was unconstitutional because it seeks to regulate activities within provincial jurisdiction. Enacted 4 years ago, the law lists activities that would trigger a federal impact review. Alberta opposed it, arguing the laws gives Ottawa power to stick its nose into provincial matters such as resource development. Last year, it asked the Alberta Court of Appeal for a legal opinion, and it called the law a wrecking ball on the rights of both Alberta and Saskatchewan. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith applauded the Supreme Court of Canada's decision. She says this is a huge win for Alberta and a huge loss for the Trudeau Liberals and Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault.
Guilbeault does not seem to acknowledge how badly he lost. And Wilkinson, I heard him say that he hopes that this is the last time that we end up going to court. Well, there's one way to assure that. They need to drop their clean electricity regulations and they need to drop their emissions cap. That will be the way that we can assure that we can come to the table and work together. The entire reason we ended up in the Supreme Court was because the federal government acted illegally. They ignored the provinces. They ignored the Senate. And they ignored the many partners who have opposed this unconstitutional law all along.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation says the Supreme Court ruling against anti-pipeline legislation is a huge victory for taxpayers and good news for Alberta's oil and gas sector. The CTF was an official intervener at Canada's highest court. The federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano, explains why this was such a huge win for taxpayers.
Well, you love to see this ruling, don't you? You love to see it. And the Supreme Court said that Trudeau's No More Pipelines law, he can't use this piece of legislation to stop premiers like Danielle Smith or Scott Moe or Francois Legault to build resource projects in their provinces to make sure that their workers can have a job. And the reason that the Canadian Taxpayers Federation had to fight this is because these resource projects, they're not only important to create jobs, but we have to remember that when politicians roadblock resource projects, they come after taxpayers to pick up the tab, right? Because we need these resource projects to produce the tax revenue, to build hospitals, to fix roads, and to lower taxes.
Alberta Finance Minister Nate Horner says if our province does abandon the Canada Pension Plan for an Alberta-made version, it will not adopt Quebec's model. That version mandates optimizing returns while also investing in the province. Horner says legislation will be introduced this fall to effectively cancel out the Quebec model and spell out that any pension assets will only be used for a pension plan. He says when it comes to mitigating risk for pension plans, the goal will be to go big and go broad. The judge who's overseeing the criminal trial involving Tamara Leach and Chris Barber, 2 of the Freedom Convoy organizers, says residents in Ottawa are now being allowed to testify. Leach and Barber are charged with mischief, counseling others to commit mischief, intimidation, and obstructing police officers for their role in the weeks-long protest in the winter of 2022. To chat about this trial in more detail is a lawyer with Empowered Canadians, Eva Chipiuk, who's at the trial and joins us now from Ottawa. Eva, what do you think the testimonies from locals will really reveal?
From what I've seen, there hasn't been much of any evidence about anything, let alone any actions that Tamara Leach and Chris Barber directly were involved in. It's been a lot of, I experienced this, I felt unsafe, I heard noise, I smelled diesel. And get this, so like maybe the most kind of like, I cannot believe this is a criminal court case where these two Canadian citizens might end up in jail because one witness's son was late for his hockey practices.
Eva, during the early part of the trial in September, Crown lawyers argue that the protest was anything but peaceful, and they say they have evidence to prove that both Barber and Leach crossed the line. The defense, however, says the pair constantly promoted peace while working with the Ottawa police. Your thoughts?
You have that right. And so, even once we have these witnesses in, we're still not hearing any evidence of illegal activity or lawfulness. It's been lawful, it's been peaceful. That's all we've heard, except for, like I said, nuisance, noise, smells.
Could Tamara Leach and Chris Barber actually see jail time? Will they be made an example of by the government?
I don't want to speculate on that. From what I've seen of 3 days of criminal trial today, I don't even understand why everyone is sitting in court and wasting the resources that is being wasted, and the loss of time for these people's lives as well to be sitting here. I can't even put my mind to them going for jail for this, but this is, as I said earlier, a potential of a 10-year sentence.
We shall keep a close eye on the trial and how everything unfolds. That was lawyer Eva Chipiuk from Empowered Canadians joining us from Ottawa. Sharon Polsky is the president of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada. She, along with many other Canadians, are really concerned about digital ID, which the government has been pushing. Polsky says a lot of your privacy may be compromised if legislation is introduced supporting it.
When all of the information about us is digital and a central authority has access to it all, we don't know what they're doing and what their perspectives are. The problem is what's legal today, but is deemed illegal tomorrow without us being told, can have massive, very serious consequences. And not only in a financial perspective, but for health, freedom, the fundamentals of democracy are being attacked here.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Sharon Polsky from the Privacy and Access Council of Canada and BCN's Naveen Day coming up later in our broadcast. Lethbridge police are warning students at the University of Lethbridge about a suspicious man. LPS staff say he's been seen around the bus loop of the U of L, asking multiple women which bus they're taking and making them feel extremely uncomfortable. The man is described as being in his late 40s, along with having dark brown and graying hair and a gray goatee. Security at the university has been made aware of the incidents and are working with police to identify the suspect. LPS is encouraging the public to call them immediately if they see any suspicious activity. Call 403-328-4444. This is Fire Prevention Week, and the theme is cooking safety. Across North America, and according to Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services, around 50% of all fires in the home are cooking fires. Those same fires are also one of the main contributors to so many home fire deaths. Troy Hicks, a fire prevention officer with the City of Lethbridge, have some tips for cooking safely.
Some of the biggest tips we give people when they're cooking is to stay alert. Don't leave home when you're cooking. I know we're all still struggling after Thanksgiving weekend and eating all that turkey, but we like to remind people when they're cooking, don't leave the house. I'm not saying you need to grab a chair and sit in front of your stove and watch your turkey cook for the 4 or 5 hours, absolutely not, but don't leave home. Make sure you're there, that heaven forbid something happen. Have working smoke detectors in your home. The biggest thing we want to remind people about smoke detectors is they do have expiry dates. They have batteries in them. Even the hardwired ones now in newer homes, the majority of them do have a battery backup.
Hicks says another way you can protect yourself and your family is to have a working fire extinguisher or two in your home. The YWCA Lethbridge and District has received a check of over $13,000 thanks to the Lethbridge and District Exhibitions lottery campaign. Now, back in February, the 50-50 lottery launched and ran throughout Whoop Up Days. Jill Young, the CEO of the YWCA, explains how the money will be used.
So YWCA is a nonprofit. We are a registered charity, and we offer a number of different services. Obviously, our Harbor House is our largest program, which is our Women and Children's Emergency Shelter. But we offer a number of different programs that support various different community services throughout Lethbridge. And so we are going to be putting this money directly into those programs.
This was the second year the exhibition hosted this lottery program. More is finally being done to protect the Blackfoot language and culture. Now that's according to Arnold Fox, who's the Director of Social Development for the Blood Tribe here in southern Alberta. Fox says it is sad, however, that many First Nations are losing their languages.
The major part of our task is to help preserve the Blackfoot language and to help the language itself move along and adapt to current terms that are used today in our everyday language. So that's why it's a dual function. We realize that a lot of First Nations across the country are losing the language. I believe there's some dire predictions that within 25 years, we will just have 3 First Nation languages still functional in Canada.
Catch the full interview with Arnold Fox from the Blood Tribe and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our broadcast. The Man in Black is coming to Lethbridge. Devin Brain will perform as renowned artist Johnny Cash in the upcoming production entitled Folsom Prison Revisited. BCN's Micah Quinn caught up with Brain to discuss his incredible show and what fans can expect November 16th at the NMAC Centre.
I hear the train a-comin', it's rolling around the bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when.
Devin Brain has taken on the role of Johnny Cash and completely made it his own. Brain will be performing famous songs by the Man in Black, including Ring of Fire, Folsom Prison Blues, and Jackson.
Folsom Prison Revisited is kind of a retelling of one of the most iconic concerts of all time in country rock music history. It's Johnny Cash's At Folsom Prison. So we kind of, it's more than just a concert or a theater experience, as it were. It's a multimedia production backed with a live band of Canadian Country Music Award winners. We tell you the tales of what happened leading up to the concert itself, and then what kind of followed in the decades following that show.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
Even though Cash passed away over 20 years ago, his songs have continued to stand the test of time.
I mean, one that comes to mind is The Man in Black. It's kind of what, I mean, he was already on the map. I shouldn't say it put him on the map, but it really kind of changed his reputation and his image in the public eye. And it speaks to his voice for the people that he tried to give to the public. He was a poet. He was very stoic, and he very much believed in the betterment of all and everyone kind of getting that chance at life.
Brain is originally from Lethbridge and picked up a guitar at the age of 17.
I will let you down. I will make you hurt.
Folsom Prison Revisited is currently touring theaters in Alberta with plans to do a cross-Canada tour in 2025.
The train keeps rolling, as Johnny would say.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
That looks like an incredible show. Always love the music of Johnny Cash, the Man in Black. Not sure if you've heard, but an amazing weekend is shaping up weather-wise here in southwestern Alberta, and we'll have full details for you in just a moment. It was so good to see more sunshine earlier today as much of the rain clouds have kind of disappeared. Jeanette Rocher is now with a full look at the forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though a beautiful weekend is shaping up here in southwestern Alberta.
Oh yeah, the weekend's going to be just lovely, so don't put away your bicycle or your golf clubs just yet, because look at the days we have ahead of us. Starting on Sunday, mainly clear skies, high of 17 degrees, all the way up to 18 on a Sunday. By the way, these temperatures much higher than the average high for this time of year. Look what we're having on Monday, high of 24 degrees, partly cloudy skies. On Tuesday, we could see some shower activity, high of 15. That looks like our coolest day all week, up to 17 on Wednesday, and all the way up to 25 degrees on Thursday with mainly sunny skies. Now, as I was saying, average high for this time of year, we're going to be above that. That number's 15. Average low, 1 degree, 29. That was our high temperature that happened back in 1969, or 64 rather. That was our record in 69. 5 years later, we reached a record cold on this day, which was a chilly -11. For sun rose this morning at 7:49. We're looking at a sunset this evening at 6:45 p.m. Oh, it's happening so early. We're looking at 3 minutes less daylight than yesterday, 10 hours and 56 minutes in total. On the west coast tomorrow, Victoria sitting at 15 degrees, high of 16 in Vancouver. Vancouver seeing some showers ending in the morning, and then we could see a slight chance of showers late afternoon. 13 for a high in both Edmonton and Calgary. with mainly sunny skies there. Both of those cities looking at some 20 to 40K winds as well. High of 13 in Saskatoon tomorrow, high of 12 degrees for both Regina and Winnipeg, with partly cloudy skies in those prairie cities. As we move on over to the central portion of the country, Toronto looking at a 30% chance of showers, high of 13 degrees, high of 14 in Ottawa. 16 is where Montreal is sitting tomorrow on Saturday with mainly clear skies. Now in Atlantic Canada, we're seeing quite a bit more precipitation. We are seeing a mix of sun and cloud in Fredericton tomorrow, high of 15. Now in Halifax, looking at a 30% chance of showers. Could see a risk of thunderstorms there. Charlottetown, here's what's happening. 12 degrees for a high, but lots of rain. We're seeing 10 to 15 millimeters of rain for a possibility. St. John's even more, looking at 10 to 20 millimeters of rain with a high of 14 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Canada's largest airline says it's cancelling all direct flights to and from Tel Aviv through the end of the month due to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Air Canada's suspension extends one that's already been in place since October the 8th. The airline says it's monitoring the conflict and will resume flights from Toronto and Montreal when the situation stabilizes. Air Canada says passengers whose trips have been cancelled can opt out and opt for a refund or booking. A top executive at Ford says the automaker has reached the limit of how much money it will spend to get a contract agreement with the striking United Auto Workers. Kumar Galhotra says Ford stretched to get to the offer it currently has on the table. His comments differ from those made by UAW President Sean Fain on Wednesday. That's when he announced an escalation of the union's month-old strike by ordering a walkout at Ford's largest and most profitable truck plant in Kentucky. The number of UAW members now on strike against Ford, GM, and Stellantis is 34,000. There are 146,000 unionized workers. Meanwhile, here in Canada, 4,300 Canadian auto workers vote tomorrow on the historic new contract with their union, Unifor, reached this week with General Motors after a short-lived strike. Ford is recalling more than 238,000 Explorers across North America. It says a rear axle bolt can fail, potentially causing a loss of power or allowing the SUVs to roll away while in park. U.S. safety regulators opened an investigation into the problem after getting 2 complaints that repairs didn't work in 2 previous recalls this year and in 2022. The latest recall includes certain Explorers from 2020 through 2022 model years. A lobby group for Canada's newspapers and magazines says it agrees with many of the issues raised by Google about the Online News Act, which will force the tech giant to compensate those same publishers for use of their work. Paul Deegan, head of News Media Group, says his group agrees with Google that there should be a cap on how much it would have to pay under the law. It also agrees the compensation could go beyond direct payments to also include things like training, and that there needs to be incentives to make sure that Google and publishers come together to reach deals. Google has said that unless their concerns are addressed, it will remove news links from its search engine by the end of the year. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 37 points on the day to finish at 19,462. The Dow was up 39 points to 33,670. The S&P 500 was down 21 on the day to 4327, and the Nasdaq was down 166 points to 13,407. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 473 to 87.64 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 13 cents to 322 US. Gold was up 59.84 on the day to 1928.74 US an ounce, and silver was up 84 cents to 22.67 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.66 per bushel, barley's at $7.51, canola's at $16.26, and corn is at $8.74 per bushel. Live cattle were down 28 cents to $185.13. Feeder cattle were down $2.15 to $249.88, and lean hogs were down 18 cents to $81.93. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.19 US. Recapping one of our top stories, there is much panic and chaos as 1.1 million people scramble to get out of Gaza following Israel's warning to evacuate within the next 24 hours. An assault would all but guarantee higher casualties on both sides of the conflict. The nearly week-old battle has killed at least 2,800 people. There are serious potential dangers when it comes to going with a global digital ID and currency. Now, that's according to Sharon Polsky, president of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada. She shares the details with us and Naveen Day in just a moment. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's top local stories, check out our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. McKillop United Church is hosting their Fall Fair on Saturday, October 14th from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Discover unique finds at their rummage and book sale. Buy homemade baking, a pizza and hot dog lunch, quilted items, plus fun for the kids with a toy sale, face painting, popcorn, and more. It's fun for the whole family at the McKillop United Church Fall Fair. Big Brothers Big Sisters in Lethbridge is looking for volunteers to mentor children and youth in their various programs. Volunteers commit to one visit per week for 1 year. They have many kids that are looking for a big brother or sister. Make a difference in a child's life and start something big. To apply, visit lethbridge.bigbrothersbigsisters.ca, and for more information, call 403-328-9355. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Digital ID and digital currency seem likely to become the norm in developed countries in the near future. Some love the convenience this brings and potentially better protection from organized crime. On the other hand, there are most certainly some very real privacy concerns around this technology. Joining us today is Sharon Polsky. She is the president of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada. Sharon, welcome back to Bridge City News. It's great to have you back.
Wonderful to see you again.
Absolutely. Now, recently, G20 nations made a decision to work towards implementing the use of global digital ID and digital currency. Why are these governments so keen on this, and what are the benefits?
Well, really, it's like with every new technology. Digital ID, centrally controlled digital currency, they're technologies that offer benefits and risks. But whether something's a benefit or a risk, and to whom, is something that's a matter of perspective. So consumers, I mean, we all benefit already from the convenience that comes with being able to use digital transactions. Your Apple Wallet, sending money by PayPal or Interac, it's everywhere. And we've gotten very used to relying on those conveniences. Credit cards, it's everywhere. And it's so common that people rely on digital to make their purchases that about 7% of Canadians no longer carry cash. That has that's a problem, though, because if more people stop using cash, it's easy to spin that as saying nobody uses cash, nobody needs cash, we don't need to have cash, and move it to digital. It's a way of justifying it. It's a problem, though, and we'll talk about that. And digital isn't just a convenience for you and me. Companies benefit from using the digital tech, and they've enticed consumers to sign up for things like loyalty programs that track what we buy. So merchants can sell and profit from that information. So It fuels an economy based on surveillance. And let's not forget the third leg of this equation is government. They benefit hugely from digital activity. And they're, on one hand, eager to increase international trade, and having single uniform digital currency would eliminate a lot of red tape. We also look at digital identities being touted as essential for everything from avoiding fraud and protecting children, of course, but it also means sharing very sensitive information, typically providing a copy of your government-issued photo ID to some company somewhere in the world that, like every company and government, promises to safeguard our information, and they apologize when it's been breached. So we're being told, don't worry, we'll protect it, this is the way it has to be, as if it's a foregone conclusion, an inevitability, and there's no point even questioning it. And it's got some serious ramifications.
So you've touched on some of the potential cons. I want to hear more about this because I know there's concern that governments might use digital currencies and IDs to monitor their people's spending and crush dissent. So how easy would it be for a government to do so?
Well, I wish I could say it's a huge challenge and it's in the future, but we've already seen it happening. Having digital technology that is centrally controlled allowed Tesla to increase the battery power in its cars that were stuck in traffic jams trying to escape impending hurricanes. With a few keystrokes, a remote adjustment meant people were able to make it to safety. We've also seen central digital control that allowed the power companies in Texas to reduce the power consumption in homes across the state during a heat wave by remotely adjusting smart thermostats. There was no warning. People were very uncomfortable,
Wow.
to say the least. And one company in Texas has an incentive program that basically you sign up to allow them to adjust things centrally, and they'll enter your name into sweepstakes. A similar program was just announced in Ontario. So that's not financial, but governments already know that freezing someone's finances, whether it's an individual or a country, that is the easiest, most effective way to lock someone out of society and commerce and to coerce cooperation. And never knowing if something is going to happen after you say or do something, that is a tremendous way of encouraging people to self-censor. If you don't know that something you post is going to be seen in a different view by the authorities, you don't say it because you can't afford to be without money. You can't buy groceries, you can't feed your kids, you can't pay your mortgage or your rent. So people are already being very quiet. And we also saw it with cancel culture. And during COVID, we saw some countries, notably China, of course, monitoring individuals centrally, controlling their mobility based on everything from their social credit score to what they posted online to their vaccine status and their health. When all of the information about us is digital and a central authority has access to it all, we don't know what they're doing and what their perspectives are. The problem is what's legal today, but is deemed illegal tomorrow without us being told, can have massive, very serious consequences. And not only in a financial perspective, but for health, freedom, the fundamentals of democracy are being attacked here.
We had numerous stories of people having their bank accounts frozen when they were protesting government mandates during COVID-19 pandemic. So this is nothing new. But I assume that these G20 nations are promising to put protections in place to safeguard against government abuse. But realistically, can citizens really trust these safeguards?
We've been told for decades now, trust us. We have protections in place. We have logical, physical, and administrative protections to protect your information. But when you look behind the curtain, it's like the Great Wizard of Oz, the protections sometimes, often aren't there. And that's why we've seen everything from governments across Canada last week to the Pentagon to NASA to every major corporation and government getting hit with cyber problems. So for all the assurances, technology is not perfect yet. It's created by imperfect people. It's not tested adequately before it's launched. That's why there's the patches that are released so frequently to fix the problems that are built into systems. So I'm reluctant to be as trusting as we're told we're supposed to be able to be. They haven't earned my trust yet.
So will governments make it mandatory to use digital ID and currency, or will they still allow cash for those who are still uncomfortable with digital, especially with digital ID and currency having flaws, as you mentioned?
Well, making it mandatory is going to be a challenge. I know the Canadian government, like so many others, have been exploring the possibility, and some proponents say, yes, it would be a terrific thing, and in some ways it would be. And they're saying, don't worry about the risks, it's not a problem. As you say, we'll protect your information, it's convenient. They're saying all the right things. But the government of Canada did its own studies and found that achieving wide adoption and acceptance of central bank digital currency will be a challenge because most Canadians right now have access to different methods of payment: cash, credit card, bank card. They also found that 11% of people with internet access refuse to bank online, and 16% do not shop online. So getting people to use digital ID and digital currency might be like facial recognition at the airport, where it's not mandatory, but nobody tells you there's any options, so people go along. And I also look to, I mean, there's a lot of countries that have already been exploring and tried to launch digital currency. One in particular has not failed dramatically like others, but they are very eager to make it work, and that's Nigeria. They have faced huge economic problems, corruption, inflation. So, to stem all of that, the government issued new currency, and they outlawed the old currency. But when they outlawed the old currency, they only issued a very limited amount of the new bills. And that forced everybody to go digital or starve. Literally, there was riots in the streets, and the government did not back down. So it's very there's a power imbalance. And when it comes to digital ID, I mean, we have companies global companies, some of them based in Canada, as well as Canadian banks and governments that are part of an industry association. These are companies that design, build, and promote digital ID tech. And they have gotten together and created a pan-Canadian framework for digital identification. And they're saying that is the way to go. That is the future. They insist that it's a very privacy-sensitive, privacy-protective way of going about it. And I look at them and think how they are profiting from using your ID and mine. And on the other hand, we look to countries in Europe where it's already, and has been for a long time, very much the normal course that if you move to one of these countries, if you move from one area of the country to another area in the same country, if you are immigrating, you have to actually register with the police, and they know everything about you. So people there are already very accustomed to carrying national ID cards, and moving it to digital is being promoted as just the more convenient, efficient, natural course of events. But, you know, I look back in history to a time not very long ago when that same sort of information was used with very rudimentary technology compared to what we have today. And that information was used for dark purposes with devastating results.
Sharon, some of our viewers do want to take action to make a difference in these kinds of matters when it comes to digital ID, digital currencies, artificial intelligence. What are some things that these people can practically do to either prevent the implementation of digital ID and currency, or to protect themselves as much as possible from compromising their privacy?
There's a couple of very simple things I think everybody needs to do, besides educating ourselves about what this is really about and what it entails, and not just listening to the companies that are they're in a compromised position. They're interested in improving their profits and bottom line, and nothing wrong with it, but we can't rely on what they say. First of all, use cash. It's as simple as that. When we say support local, and I see people going into the local shop, the local coffee shop, and handing over their credit card, the merchants automatically hand over the tap screen, and customers automatically hand over a digital form of payment. The merchant loses to the credit card company because part of the payment goes in fees. And the message there is nobody wants cash, nobody uses cash, we don't need cash. So first of all, use cash, and it sends a very, very clear message. The other thing is tell our lawmakers at every single level of government what we want and what you don't want. Email them, phone them, write them an old-fashioned a letter. I mean, it costs absolutely nothing to mail a letter to an MP in Ottawa. Even better, talk to your local riding association. We're coming into a federal election sooner than later. There's municipal and by-elections. Tell your riding association that digital ID, digital currency, and privacy are important to you, make it an election issue. The elected people, the people we elect, are supposed to represent the electorate's views. They haven't in a long time. We need to change that.
That was Sharon Polsky. She is the president of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada. Sharon, thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, anytime.
Did you know that, as with most languages, the words for certain modern-day items didn't always exist? And this, of course, is especially true of Indigenous languages like the Blackfoot language. In fact, it's quite interesting how some of the Blackfoot elders have come up with words or phrases for modern items like computers, cell phones, and texting. I'm so pleased to have Arnold Fox joining me today. Arnold is the director of the Blood Tribe Social Development, and he's going to talk to us a little bit more about Blackfoot language and interpretation. Welcome to the show, Arnold. Great to have you on today.
Happy to be here, Jeanette.
Okay, so why don't you maybe start off by telling me a bit about what you do, what your work kind of looks like over there at Blood Tribe Social Development?
Okay. Well, in relation to the Blackfoot Signage Project and in relation to the Blackfoot language, our department stepped forward to host what we eventually called ATEEP Weeks Language Committee. So ATEEP Weeks means Blackfoot speaking. That's what that phrase, that word means, ATEEP Week. So we're the speaking language group. And the task that was given to us, it was instituted a little over 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. The major part of our task is to help preserve the Blackfoot language and to help the language itself move along and adapt to current terms that are used today in our everyday language. So that's why it's a dual function. We realize that a lot of First Nations across the country are losing the language. I believe there's some dire predictions that within 25 years, we will just have 3 First Nation languages still functional in Canada.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's quite astounding once you think about it. And I grew up with the Blackfoot was the first language, and I can't really envision not being able to use that or not giving it to our children and our grandchildren to be able to carry forth. So that was the gist of our task in that committee. The committee itself has 10 to 12 elders who come together once a month, and we offer an annual symposium. Blackfoot Language and Symposium in Lethbridge is the most convenient location. There are some representations from other Blackfoot nations in the area, Blackfeet in Montana, the Pinchot Nation near Pincher Creek, and Siksika near east of Calgary. So those are the Blackfoot-speaking nations in North America.
Fascinating,
Yeah. So out of that, I would say I'm being optimistic by saying 20% of us still use that language on an everyday basis. So it definitely is in fear of dying at a certain point or not being utilized anymore. So that's what we're hoping to avoid. We're realizing now with the programs that we offer, even in social services, we offer short-term employment training for our clients. And we have fully realized over the years that one of the modules they take is the Blackfoot culture and the Blackfoot language. I used to take for granted that our younger people had this opportunity to learn at home and all of that, but that's not the case. In my generation, we were lucky that there was a very limited amount of influence from media. So the everyday language we heard all the time was Blackfoot, whereas our younger people are inundated with TV, just to start there, radio. I often tell my audiences that when I was growing up in the 50s, 1950s, we had a radio, an old radio that sat on top of a cabinet, and there was a big dry cell battery. So whenever the battery went dead, there went our connection with the outside world.
Sure.
We're particularly insular in those days, so we didn't have all those influences.
Yeah.
Just as one of my nephews, we made a concerted effort to have him speak Blackfoot from the time he started uttering words, and he was doing really good. Okay, we noticed that the words he was uttering up to 2 years of age were Blackfoot, but that's because in the home we had decided, no, he's going to speak Blackfoot. He discovered TV around that age, and what's that? Anyways, he discovered it and was very drawn.
Probably Nickelodeon or, you know, the kids shows, right?
Sesame Street, you know, but they're all in English, eh?
Yeah.
So we realize the influence that our young people have to live with is nothing like what I went through growing up. Mm-hmm. It was comfortable for me to carry on the Blackfoot language, but it's not for our kids anymore.
No, that's so interesting, and it's so true, and it's something we don't really think about. You were mentioning that they're predicting there could only be 3 Indigenous languages left. How many are there? I mean, there must be hundreds, right?
Well, yeah, if you stop to think, there are 500 plus different First Nations in Canada. To get an idea, of course, there's regional, you know, like the Woodland Cree have a big area in most of the provinces. So that language I know will survive because there's a lot of speakers over an extended geographical area. But once you start, like I said, becoming too insular, you don't have that opportunity. And in our population too.
Definitely. So interesting. Now, Arnold, as the director of the Blood Tribe Social Services, I know that you are also involved in a Blackfoot signage project. And just for some background for our viewers, several organizations in southwestern Alberta, I guess, have partnered up with Kainai Nation to fund the construction of Blackfoot language signs across the region. So I guess this is to both enrich the landscape and invite locals and visitors to learn more about the deep history of the region. And I would say have the opportunity to see the translations of certain community names in the Blackfoot language sort of come to life. I find that really interesting. So Arnold, as the director of Blood Tribe Social Services, you're a part of this signage project, which will see these beautiful signs come to life with this language. So tell me more about this project and sort of how it came to be.
Okay, I would like to think that really the idea was planted as part of the TNR, the Truth and Reconciliation. All of the recommendations, I think there was 108 recommendations that came from that. And I've been noticing in southern Alberta, in my world, I travel a lot to Lethbridge. We're not confined. We shop in Fort McLeod, Cardston. So we have a lot of daily interaction with these communities. And the Blackfoot names that were assigned to these communities go way back. Now, there's some newer communities that we're going to have to sit with the elders to develop the name. So South Rose, the name of the organization that invited me to join. And so I did. And I didn't really know at first what the extent of the program was. But in our first couple of meetings, I've grown to appreciate that this is a really worthwhile effort for southern Alberta. I don't think there's enough we can do to further the relations between the population here, the Blackfoot or Blood population on Kainai, and the surrounding communities. There's been some excellent relationships that have developed over the years. I can two at this point that are kind of related to what we're doing. It just emphasizes more communication, positive in a positive light. So that's what we're doing with these. Now we're going to open it up. It's open to towns and counties. how when you enter a county, you see a little
Yeah,
sign.
like welcome to Tabor or Cardston or yeah.
So those are the two kind of that are foremost. Certainly welcome to look at other, but for those two, for the towns and the counties, we're definitely looking and hoping to get applications from them to this on this signage. I'm thinking it's another opportunity for us to interact with the wider population. And there's another initiative that's looking at racism and working with the mayors of the surrounding towns and trying to establish a common footing to address the racism. Now, there was another project I was thinking of, but those give you an idea that there's more activity, there's more interaction between the Black community and the surrounding. We've utilized the towns, like I said, for shopping. 50% of our kids are bused off the Blood Reserve to the surrounding communities to attend school. So there's a great deal of interaction, and we just want to try and do our part to ensure that there's more positive chances than there are for negative interaction.
Yeah, no, it's such a fabulous idea, and I just look forward to seeing these new signs going up. And I believe the project is inviting communities, businesses, institutions to take part. And what they can do is, I believe they can apply. Is it a $2,000 grant that they can receive for the creation of this sign, right?
With the stipulation, they throw in 500. So we're offering them 80% funding for the sign. Yeah. So I should mention also, Jeanette, that I explained to the committee that I'm working, to the signage committee, that there are names for some of the older communities in southern Alberta, but it's not always a direct translation. There's something that strikes our elders that's peculiar about this, and that sometimes they go with that. I'll give you an example, Tabor.
Okay.
Because Tabor sounds similar to table.
Okay.
That's actually that our name for Tabor is Idasuyo, which means something we eat on, which was the name we gave. So it's not, whereas Fort McLeod, Agapuyus, means many houses. So that's where the fort was established, and then the community started growing. So we refer to it as many houses. So that's been historically the name. Yes, and Lethbridge, Sikoko, Black Rock, for the coal mining history that Lethbridge was the central part of in southern Alberta. So it would be a direct translation or just a similar sounding word in the English language, like Tabor. Right?
I've also been told, Arnold, that you're a wealth of information when it comes to the language, the Blackfoot language, and particularly how some of the language has had to sort of adapt over the years to accommodate more for modern words, almost like, like the technology that we use, like computers, cell phones, because those weren't around, obviously, back when the Blackfoot language was coming to be. I'd love it if you could tell me a little bit more about that.
So we, at the annual symposium where we gather the reps mainly from Ghana, from Blood, but like I said, the 3 other Blackfoot nations always have reps there. So one session is always devoted, we call it coining new phrases, So the audience is invited. We always limit it to around 200, 225, and it's always full. We have to turn people away. So we know it's been a very popular symposium over the years. So in opening up that one session, we invite the audience to submit words that they would like translated. And we'd like to make a difference at this point between translation and interpretation. So we offer both. We can interpret word for word, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily work. So sometimes we have to interpret what the speaker is trying to say and then issue our word for it or develop our word for it. So, yeah, so that's been a a major part of our work in bringing the community together. And what we want to do is, when we have enough of these new words, publish them in a booklet so people can use them for easy reference. There's been a number of other organizations that have developed apps for the Blackfoot language. So you just go into that and you get the translation for the, well, not the translate, the pronunciation.
Okay.
And the translation or interpretation of. So there's a lot of tools that are available out there for people who are interested to start learning it. So texting at our second last symposium, we said, okay, everybody, even our seniors use texts nowadays, eh? So we said, okay, how do we translate it? And the most accepted one in the symposium seemed to be Steckam Sinakyo, an object or a process where you write fast. So that's how we.
Okay. So it interprets into process where you write fast. Texting. Maybe not for all of us, though. Especially when you get those clumsy thumbsies, you know, and you're like, have to go back. That's not what I meant to say. Arnold, it looks like we're about out of time, but thank you so much for joining me today and having this really fun conversation about, you know, some of the interpretation of Blackfoot language. It's really interesting.
Okay, well, I hope we have a chance as we move further along. I can report how many communities have taken us up on our offer, etc. Yeah.
I would love to hear that. Thanks so much, Arnold. Arnold Fox is the Director of Blood Tribe Social Services. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.